Yeah, go ahead, Slate.
There are rich histories in every culture. There's a real need to raise the level of competency, of understanding who your neighbor is. We have a responsibility to raise that level of cultural competency so we understand those rich histories and we're not perpetuating the stereotypes that we've done for decades. Cultural competency is fully understanding someone else's culture. Understanding enough about who we are as a people. Anybody who is not looking like you or not having the same culture as you. I've always wanted to be a journalist. I loved finding information and being able to share that information. My dad was the assistant director of civil rights for the AFL-CIO. He was in Selma, Alabama, ready to cross the Edmund Pettus Bridge with Martin Luther King. He was on picket lines with Bayard Rustin. My parents understood the fight for equality was not an easy one. When I was in junior high school, there were kids cutting through our yard, and they looked at me and they said the N-word. I was like, where? What are you talking about? Where? And I said, Mom, some kids walking across our lawn just called me the N-word. And I think my mom at that point started to prepare me and my brothers for what could be ahead. In high school, I was one of 7 African Americans out of 540 seniors. And one of my teachers asked me to do a Geraldine imitation. Flip Wilson was Geraldine.
Geraldine's my name and telephones are my game.
And he would sort of prance around and my teacher asked me, you can do it. And I'll never forget this. I said, just because you're fat, white, and sloppy, I don't ask you to do Jackie Gleason. Bang, well, I got suspended. My parents were proud that I stood up for myself. When I was in college, I did join the Panther Party. I ended up going to Boston University, graduating with a degree in journalism, and then getting a job almost immediately at WBZ in Boston. And I went home for the weekend, and a friend of mine called me, and she said, are you in DC? And I said, yeah. She said, well, why don't you come over to the hotel here? The Black elected officials are here, and there's going to be a reception. I met my friends in the lobby, and one said, before we head to the reception, there's an organizational meeting. And I said, of what? And he said, oh, just a bunch of journalism folks are there. And there were about 50 people. I kind of recognized these people, and I was like, whoa. And I was all of 22 years old. I ended up knowing Robert's Rules of Order, and the meeting was starting to get silly. And I finally said, Mr. Chairman, and he said, yes, point of order. What's your point? And I gave him whatever point it was. And he said, congratulations. And I said, for what? And he said, you're now our parliamentarian. And I said, of what? And he said to somebody, what are we calling ourselves? And somebody said, we are the National Association of Black Journalists. I wrote the first constitution of the organization. We started out with 44 of us, and we are now well over 4,000. Someone heard about me from NBC, and that's how I got to the Peacock Network. I was a really big consumer of our news content at NBC. And there were things that I was seeing that disturbed me. Among them were crime stories. The crime stories would give you the impression that the only people who were committing crimes in this country were people of color. And I was really, really active in terms of voicing my objection to that. I got other people involved. People realized that we were stereotyping people according to their race. I think journalists today need to get out of the newsroom a little more and learn about communities that they serve. It's really going out and learning about the people who are around you. I worry about students who come from communities where Black history is not going to be taught and will end up in our newsrooms. I worry about those folks who are going to college now and will be going to college in the future that will never have gone with somebody who was different from them, will never have learned about their struggles and about their history. I worry about that now. I'm delighted, to see what has happened in some cases through NABJ, where we're able to advocate to make sure that the president of ABC News is a Black woman, that the president of MSNBC is a Black woman. And we're able to talk about the importance of that because we've been at the table and we need to continue to be at the table. I wanted to tell good stories. I wanted to inform, I wanted to educate, and I wanted to promote change. And I thought that being a journalist was the best way to do that. And through the years, I hope that I have done my profession proud.